No, as I told you before, I'm not a visionary. I've never seen her. But you have had this whole series of feelings, circumstances, situations which will tell you exactly. So, which is the way, the method in which you have started spreading these messages? What did you do? How did you do it? All right, well, first of all, of course, I started with the messages of San Bonico. I've studied them. Then I've looked also into the messages of other apparitions in Brazil, Argentina, and other parts of the world. I was very impressed by their correlation, but also by their content, which is exceedingly strong. So I told myself, we got to do something and we got to do it also fast. In fact, I didn't wait long and I printed right away a few sheets which listed some Marian prophecies to be spread. Then I began by going to Paolo Brosio and telling him, in San Bonico, Our Lady is appearing, so get there and bring some people. Then talk about this apparition on TV, since they invite you to the Italian TV channels, Rete 4, Italia 1. Yes, of course, he had the right connections. Exactly, precisely. He said, no, sorry, I'm into something else. I'm having a hospital built in Medjugorje. I don't have time for that. All right, every weekend, and I mean every weekend without exception, I used to be in a different town and to enter 3, 4, or 5 churches of this town. I'd just stand outside the church and hand over these sheets to the people coming out of Mass or entering church to attend Mass. Then I'd go and hand over them to the priest too. I wasn't very successful. Let me give you a few examples here too. I went into a church. The Mass was ended since about 10 minutes, so I didn't know who celebrated it. I walked into the sacristy and there was someone smoking a cigarette. Then I said, excuse me, do you know where the priest? And he turned me down flat, saying, I don't know that. Someone else walked into the sacristy and I asked him, excuse me, you know where the priest? And he answered, well, that's the guy smoking his cigarette. So I was about to hand him over the sheets, telling him these are some Marian prophecies, and he grabbed my arm right away and got me out of there. And he told me, get out, get away, because about Virgin Mary, we got this. Holy shit. Another time, I walked into a church, this time 10 minutes before the Mass. I stepped into the sacristy. There was a priest, and they gave him the sheet. I explained something, he reads some messages, and then he starts yelling, this is not Our Lady. This is your lady. But really he started screaming on top of his lungs, and he went on for some minutes. I watched him in silence, then I went out of the sacristy. The sacristy is the room which flanks the altar where we celebrate. So I stepped out of the sacristy, and since the Mass should begin, it was full of people. There were something like 200 people in silence, staring at me with wide eyes, like I was a madman. You know, I met the priest yelling, so they took me for a bad guy. So, I've endured unpleasant and sleazy situations. Some failures, but I've never given up. And I have always been moving on. And every weekend I moved on, going to different towns. Actually, I've begun to go to the conferences where they deal with the spiritual topics. Even there, I wasn't treated so well. Then, at the beginning of the year 2017, besides going to churches and conferences, I have begun to go to the policemen, to the cops, to police headquarters, to the firefighters, the financiers, to the military, I handed them over the sheets saying, here there is a list of some Marian messages. Keep them, and when what is written here will happen, contact me because those are very serious topics. I gave them my telephone number and my mail address too. These things are happening. For example, in one of these sheets, I talked about worldwide pandemics. It's happening, and they have not contacted me. So I have witnessed a nasty indifference in that field too. Lack of interest and a nasty indifference, right? Yes, unfortunately, a nasty indifference. Then I thought, what about the Muslims, the Buddhists, the Hindu? They must know too, of course. And I never liked those close-minded talks, those mental cages, such as Virgin Mary appeals to the Christians, so we must tell only the Christians. No, why is that? So I started going to the mosque, to the warehouses where Buddhists and Hindu gather together. And in some cases, they treated me better than the consecrated people. The Hindu let me in their buildings. Of course, I had to respect a couple of rules. I took my shoes and my socks off. I walked in barefoot. They put a bandage on my head. I went there with my computer. I showed them a few very short clips about the Marian apparitions, and I explained them these messages, and they listened to me. Children were the most curious. Then they gave me some fried sweets and chips, some pasta and rice dishes. They were feeding you. Yes, haha. They treated me well enough, but in the end, I must admit that I didn't get great results with these sheets. I have not awakened many souls. In the early 2019, I have begun some more detentions. Still because of some past issues, but very mildly, in the mildest form. I mean, I could not get out of the Lombardy region. I had to stay home from evening until morning because also policemen used to come for random checks. You were under house arrest, Right, a mild way. So, since I couldn't travel freely around Italy, the work of spreading these sheets dropped, and I have started to spread these messages through some footage on YouTube. Here we can recognize some sort of relentlessness from this point of view. How come so relentless? That's to say, I will not give up. It's like saying, I will not give up. You said it right. I was relentless. First of all, I'm a hypersensitive person, which has nothing to do with good or bad. If someone does me good, I want to return the favor somehow. I have seen the messages of these visionaries describing Our Lady while she's crying. Because in some apparitions, her messages have been concealed, like for example in Lourdes, La Salette, Fatima, and they are not taking the present messages into account at all. There is a well-structured, well-organized occultic force which is blocking the dissemination of the word of Mary. She's suffering a lot because of it. And this aspect of the mother impressed me a lot. And it's always been bothering me, so we must break this wall, also because we are out of time. The Holy Mother talks about pandemics, catastrophes, persecutions, wars, but it's not the usual historic cycles which repeats itself, like many others. And I'm going to read you a few messages to let you understand better. Of course, Oliveto Citra, Apparitions, Caserta, 2006. My children, the world will suffer even greater punishments because his coming is very, very near. That is why God is dividing good from evil. The upcoming punishments are the consequences of our sins against our planet, mankind, and our neighbor, which have an impact on us. So it's not the typical punishment, vengeance as we understand it. Spiritual in that sense, yeah. They are more like heartfelt feelings. We really, really perceive that. Sure, but they're also like natural events which are going to fall on us. As you can see, mankind is making some very important life choices, especially during this period. And according to these choices, the Father is already making the selection between good and evil. That's right. We realize that in our everyday life. Exactly.